for finance as well. So check those events out on Handshake if they're of interest to you. The Career Center is hosting them all throughout the summer, getting you ready for the fall semester and options available to you for internships and full-time opportunities. So for today's session, we're going to recommend switching your camera view over to speaker view just for a more pleasant viewing experience. That's in the top right corner of your camera of your webinar, up in the top right. If you have questions about the session, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Andrew and I are going to chat. Andrew are going to chat for the first like 30-ish minutes of this call, and then there's going to be time for questions from you. So please feel free to insert those, or if you feel comfortable asking at the end, please feel free to unmute yourself and do that. Totally fine. Let's just go ahead and get started by introducing our alum. Andrew, I guess just first question is tell us a little bit about yourself and your major at UVA, your career trajectory, the whole 9 yards.
Sure. Thanks, Drew. And nice to see all you fellow who's. I am a fellow who myself. I graduated in 2013 from UVA. I majored in economics, and I concentrated in international economics. And I also had a minor in history. So in terms of my career trajectory, I had no idea what I wanted to do in my second and third year at UVA. I'd had a few different internships related to finance and accounting-based work. I'd seen that I had some interest in data mining, data analysis. I'd taken some classes, both domestic and abroad. I actually studied abroad in Copenhagen, Denmark, my third year. And I found that what I really was interested in was a kind of a combination of data analysis, analytics, as well as healthcare, and just the fact that healthcare is such a dynamic industry, always changing. I knew nothing about it other than some healthcare economics classes that I'd taken, and it really just drove my interest in kind of adding that as a potential career for me. And so, kind of putting all those pieces together, as well as talking to some roommates and some friends of mine who had been in the consulting space for a year or had done an internship in consulting, I really kind of gave that a shot and started, just talking to fellow friends and folks that were either already at my company, which is FTI Consulting, or some similar management consulting firms such as Deloitte and Accenture. And that kind of led me to the path of recruiting at FTI, recruiting at a few other economic consulting firms. And that kind of gave me my job as a consultant. So I started in 2013, and I've been there ever since. And I've been kind of continuing in the promotional trajectory, which is now I'm a director at FTI. And I specialize technically in forensic and litigation consulting for healthcare clients. So I'm in the health solutions group there.
That's awesome. So it sounds like networking was a big piece for you. Can you tell us a little more about how you got started with FTI, a little about that process, and maybe also how you chose FTI to work for as your first organization out of school?
Yeah. So for me, consulting was something that I was really interested in because it gave me the ability to work on a variety of projects at one time. And that's really cool. It's something that I didn't have the opportunity to do in some of my internships that I'd had. I had worked at a company called Living Social, which is kind of I guess the predecessor to Groupon back in the day. And that was a fun company. I was really doing just one thing. I was kind of siloed, doing one type of accounting and reporting. Every day was very similar. I had a similar experience at this information analytics firm that I'd worked for in my third year summer. And I wanted to have that ability to work on one project one week, and then I might get a totally different project, not only with a different client, but also with a different role. So maybe I'll be more of the data analytics guy in a particular project. And then now I'm more of the report writer in another project. And that was really fascinating to me. And so that was one reason why I chose FTI specifically, is because I was going to be given those opportunities. And that rang true in my first year as a consultant. I was working on several different clients, being able to get exposed to a variety of different clients within the healthcare industry. I was working with pharmaceutical manufacturers. I was working with insurance companies. I was working with hospital systems, all while working, and we'll probably get to this in a little bit, but also working with law firms as well. Because that's kind of the difference between the standard management consulting that you might have heard about when you think of Deloitte and Accenture and BCG, and then some of the more niche economic litigation consulting firms that will work with law firms. And so that was a really interesting experience as a consultant, getting all that exposure. And it's continued for the last 4 or 5 years. I've been able to kind of continue networking, meeting new clients, building my repertoire of expertise in the healthcare analytics field through all the different clients that I've worked with.
That's awesome. So I think economic litigation consulting, sometimes students can get a little bit confused on what that is, like what that means. Could you help us just define at a basic level, what is economic litigation consulting overall?
Sure. So with that word, I would kind of say it could be used interchangeably with forensic litigation consulting too. I've heard both. What I would say our group tends to call it forensic litigation consulting, just because we have an economic consulting wing as well at our company. And then in addition to that, we actually have a subdivision within our company called Compass Lexicon. Professor Elsing actually used to be an external consultant for Compass Lexicon. Fun little fact there. So when I think of economic consulting, that'll typically be folks doing antitrust litigation work, working with PhDs in economics and master's students in economics, and they serve as the subject matter experts in a lot of the consulting cases. With forensic litigation consulting, typically what that will mean is that we will have a law firm, third-party law firm, that will come to us to retain FTI because they are representing some sort of end client, in my case, a healthcare client that's in some sort of distressful situation. And so that could be them being investigated by the Department of Justice for improper claim submissions to CMS, or it could be that there's a price switching scheme that is impacting Medicaid reimbursement, and they want us to come and do some sort of damage analysis or any sort of data support that will help inform the arguments that the attorneys are making to create a favorable outcome for our client. And so it's interesting. It's different than management consulting, where you might be working directly with the client. We are working with a third-party legal team. Sometimes we're working with the legal team exclusively. Sometimes we will work with a combination of the managers at the client as well as the legal team. And sometimes we are mostly working with the client and then very little from the legal team. So it's usually a combination of different relationships with those two different entities. But that's why I think it's really interesting getting that experience in consulting, and it's different than the standard management or strategy consulting, because you're working with not only those clients, you're having to work with the law firms, the senior partners that have been, Harvard law grads that have been working in this industry for 20 years, and they're coming to you for advice and support to help with their case. And they're usually very, very happy about it, very appreciative of the work that we do. And on top of that, we have a lot of work that we'll do with valuation firms. We'll work with PE firms as well. So there's a lot of different cooks in the kitchen at times in a lot of our matters. But I think that it's a really big value add in your career. So, you work in consulting for however many years. If you ever go anywhere else, you've got all that experience working with all these different parties that you can bring to your next job. So I think that that's a really cool value add of economic consulting.
I think that's a great sort of point too, Andrew, about some of the differences between economic litigation / forensic consulting and management consulting, which I know is a big question sometimes students have of like, how do I understand the different, you've heard them as sometimes wings at FTI too, that are options for me to work. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
In terms of your economics degree, how do you think that major has sort of helped to translate to your career, or even the history minor too, any part of your education from UVA?
Yeah, I think there's two main, I'll say, explicit ways that the economics degree has helped me. And then I think there's more implicit, just applications experiences I had in economics that I think have indirectly helped me. But starting with just statistics, for instance, I thought I would take statistics, whatever it was, like 201, statistics, one of the prerequisites for the economics degree, and then never see it again. And that has not been the case. I've used statistics many times in my job, and I do, economic and financial consulting. Didn't think I'd touch statistics. We do a lot of statistical random sampling, especially when we're doing either mock audits or internal audits with hospital systems and companies that are under investigation, and they want to see well, let's see how accurate our coding practices are. And we'll do randomized sampling using various applications, whether it be R, using Stata, using SAS, using some other proprietary governance software. And so I've been, having to use confidence intervals. I've used, having to understand how to develop sample sizes. Things like that have happened a lot while I've been working. And some of the people that end up actually being kind of go-to subject matter experts are those that have that statistical background. So a lot of the, there's some really famous PhD economists that work at our company that are really well known for their ability to use statistical analysis to improve a company's legal argument. And so they will get pulled on because of that expertise. And so that's been really good. And I got that experience also in econometrics, which I think was like 3720. That was really great. I also think that the Stata experience that I had in that class was a good prerequisite to a lot of the relational databases that I'm now working in, which will include Stata, SAS. I use Tableau, which is data visualization software. Being able to understand Stata didn't make me an immediate expert and savant in those categories, in those other relational databases, but it did give me an understanding of how programming languages work, and that was really helpful. And so I think those two there were just right off the bat really, really easy ways for me to distinguish myself when I started out as a consultant, having that background. I'd also say just kind of the way that we, in a lot of our classes, would use economic models to real world situations and try and solve some sort of issue. And a lot of it's all, most of it, if not all of it, is theoretical in a lot of the exams you're taking, but that's pretty much the same thought process of critical reasoning that you're using in consulting. You're taking a predefined model and you are inputting data of some sort into that model, and then you're trying to, based on various, whether it be exogenous shocks, macroeconomic shocks in the real life application of the exam, or it's some sort of issue that the lawyers are having with the client that they're representing, and something happened, and we now need to identify that variable and account for it, and then try and bring about some sort of favorable solution via some sort of recommendation. And that way of thinking was something I was already doing in a lot of the classes I was taking. And I think that served me really well in consulting. And I've just generally seen that a lot of the folks that come from liberal arts backgrounds who have done critical thinking, had critical reasoning skills, and being able to apply theories to real world situations have done really well in consulting.
That's awesome. And I think that's great to hear. So a lot of what you just mentioned, there's some programming and technical languages that sound like it helped to sort of serve you well. And I think you sort of already hit this, but if you want to add anything at all, how else do you think a liberal arts background really lends well to a career in consulting?
So for me, and this might be, if there's any questions about what I think that students could do as well to prepare themselves, and I don't want to bury the lead here, but this is also something I think would be really helpful is trying to get some experience in writing. If you aren't already getting that, I think that's something that really helped me having a liberal arts background, and you guys already have all this as economics majors, being able to take, English classes and history classes and learning how to write, because a lot of the work we do, whether you're a consultant or a director or a partner, you are going to be writing a lot. And a lot of it is usually writing that you enjoy doing. You're summarizing a lot of the analysis that you've spent a lot of time investing in over the last few weeks of some projects. So you've got all these recommendations from the data that you've mined, manipulated, analyzed, and now you're trying to make it create some sort of cohesive summary to send to either the client or your internal team director or manager. And so that is really important to be able to learn how to structure emails and structure reports. We have in a lot of typical economic consulting cases is you'll have expert reports that a lot of times we'll file on behalf of FTI as the third party, saying, hey, this is our thoughts, this is how we would rebut the plaintiff's argument. And it could be a 80-page deck, and the consultants are the ones writing it. I mean, the partner's signing their name at the end, and they're obviously going to be checking it day to day, making sure that they're in agreement with everything. But the consultants are a lot of times writing a lot of these reports. So it's good to have that good writing foundation. And then, I'd also say, having any sort of class in public speaking or negotiations, just being able to improve your communication skills is really important. That goes a long way as you start trying to distinguish yourself as a third or fourth year in consulting, and you might want to start trying to pitch, because obviously consulting at the end of the day is a sales job. Once you get to the higher ups, once you become a partner, you're not only doing the work, you're also selling the work and trying to retain work and keep work from return clients. So having good communication skills is really important. And that's why I think liberal arts majors who, folks that might also be, double majoring in economics and English, or economics and foreign affairs, whatever, other major might have some sort of communications background. I've got a coworker who does, I think she was economics and like media studies, and she's actually she's an excellent speaker. And so she's actually done really well because she's got that quantitative interest as well as the qualitative soft skills.
Awesome. And Andrew, you just talked a little bit about the different levels that you can work in within the consulting organization. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey? So you started off at FTI. Tell us a little bit about where you started and then versus where you are now, and maybe a little bit about how those roles differ and change as you move up the flagpole.
Yeah. So for me, it was pretty straightforward. I didn't do any sort of change in my group at all. I stayed within health solutions. So I came on as a consultant, hired back in 2013, and we were doing forensic litigation consulting for healthcare clients. I'm still doing that today. I would say that my responsibilities have changed in the sense that I began, doing a lot of the data analytics, a lot of the document review, a lot of the work that needed to be done, whether it could also be, writing a lot of research that we were doing and developing summaries for my managers and for the client, but not necessarily being the client face of FTI. I was more so kind of in the background doing a lot of the work with various team members. I was probably only working on, one, maybe two projects at a time. And usually if it was two projects, it was that one was active and the other was relatively inactive. So I was really focusing on one project. What you'll see in consulting, not just in forensic and litigation consulting, but also in management consulting, is that as you move up, the number of projects that you work on might actually grow. And so you might work on 2 or 3 projects at a time once you're now a senior consultant, which is what happened with me. But the work that you might be doing is now you might have some folks that are working under you, and you will, perform quality control, what we call a QC, on a lot of their work to make sure that they've been doing, they're analyzing the data correctly and they're applying the right controls and assumptions. But then also now at your role, you're now probably maybe communicating some of those summaries of the data and the recommendations to the client. Maybe you start speaking to the client directly more. You start becoming the point of contact with the managers at your company. People will expect more of you and have more responsibility. You'll have more responsibilities to that extent. And then as you get to the director level, now you're really seen as somebody who is the point person. So whenever the partner gets the project, they're going to look to you to start facilitating the relationship with the client in scheduling a lot of those meetings and being able to lead a lot of meetings, and maybe going and meeting with the client in person, and going to being from an administrative perspective, being the person who's handling a lot of the invoicing and the billing, because that's obviously a big part of consulting, is making sure you get money for the work that you're doing. And so that ends up being a big part of my job, is just administrative duties as well as providing support for all of the consultants and senior consultants below me. And that's also, obviously as a manager, you want to be providing, a good culture as well. I mean, you're a culture leader to a certain extent, making sure that people have the right work-life balance and checking in on people. I'm also a performance manager for folks. And so I've got 2 consultants that, and some interns that I am a performance or kind of career coach / performance coach for. And so I'll check in with them on kind of a bi-weekly or monthly basis to make sure that they're, having a good experience with FTI and they don't have any issues from either a social or professional standpoint.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.
And I think you just dug into this a little bit. So if it's too repetitive, no worries, but tell us what you like most about your daily work, but also maybe some challenges that you face in your work too.
So I think what I like, and this is a little bit cliche, but I can truly say that in my company, we are a very collaborative group of folks. And so, and I think you'll get this at a lot of other smaller niche economic consulting firms. We are not cutthroat in the sense that, everyone's looking out for number one and just trying to, rise to the ranks. We are very collaborative because at the end of the day, we're all on a team for months on end. And I like to call it kind of supported ambition. So everyone is trying to support one another. Everyone's ambitious. Everyone is a go-getter. You got this job because you went to a really good school and you were able to, do well in your economics majors and your other majors. So, obviously everyone's very smart and is trying to do their best, but everyone is helping everyone else out. And I've gotten the sense from some folks that I've some just friends of mine who work in other consulting firms that sometimes that's not the case. In some instances, it's really, really competitive. Even if you're trying to, get onto a new project, a lot of other companies, you actually have to apply and interview to get to another project. Otherwise you might get slated on a less than ideal project. And there's certainly arguments for that. But with us, we typically have, again, a much more collaborative model where everyone is just, trying, if you've got a question, you can go to your manager and ask it. There's no dumb questions. And I really enjoy that experience. And I think one of the reason why I think that's true is because one of the things that I look forward to every morning is, waking up and having that 9:30 meeting to talk to my teammates, because it's not just, we work together 8-9 hours a day. So we get to, have some personal discussions talking about, how's everyone doing throughout the COVID experience? What are some fun things that people have been doing to stay busy? It's a lot of fun camaraderie, and I enjoy that aspect. And I don't know if you get that at some other firms, specifically outside of consulting, where you might just kind of have your day job, you're doing it, you've got some marching orders to do for the next 3 or 4 days, and you kind of just go off to the races. With us, we're always checking in with each other, always trying to kind of better each other. And I'd say on similar lens there, the variety of projects that I work on, I think is also really great. I know we touched on that earlier, but I think that's something I really enjoy, being able to, the ability to take that skill then to my next career, whenever that might be, is also really, really rewarding. So for instance, I can go and work on a project and be the point of contact and be leading a call at 1 o'clock. And then I'm talking to senior partners at King and Spalding at 4 o'clock about a completely different matter. And that's tough to do in the beginning. You really need to have some experience doing that. But once you get a hang of it and you're able to kind of switch your brain and work on 2 or 3 projects at a time, that's a really valued asset that you can bring to the table in your next job. So I think those are likes. I think challenges, I'd say time management is a big issue, because similar to what I just explained with, having multitasking and working on multiple projects at once, you're going to have situations where you've got time management that you need to work with. And that's something I talk to my consultants about all the time. No one's perfect at it right at the beginning. It's just something you got to work on, figuring out who to reach out to when you feel like you are getting pushed a little bit too hard and you feel like you have too much on your plate. What do you do in that situation? That's hard. It's a challenge that we experience every day. And I'm still working on it. I admittedly put that as my room for improvement. I think every performance meeting that I have. And then the other thing similar to that is in litigation consulting, obviously we have deadlines, and the deadlines in litigation consulting are a little bit stricter than the more standard management consulting deadlines generally. And so, the reason for that is that you've got the DOJ coming and knocking on the client's door saying, hey, we are suing you for $100 million. You have a complaint that we filed you guys 2 months ago. We need the discovery materials, or we need the analysis that you have promised us today. And so that's a strict deadline. And then you have the deadline of the attorneys who you're working with that might want it a few days earlier. And then you might have internal deadlines because you or your manager have other deadlines that are going on with other projects. So it's a ton of deadlines that you're currently trying to work on. And at times it can be a little tough. And so that's where, time management becomes really important. But I think it's a challenge you're going to experience at every consulting firm. And it's something that you get the hang of. It just takes some time to figure it all out.
Absolutely, that adjustment period. And students too, one of the things Andrew was talking about in that like section was a lot about culture and the culture of FTI. And I think these conversations are great to sort of learn and assess what that culture looks like, because you may want a different type of culture. Learning about that, I think, is really helpful in these kind of more informal conversations. You can say, hey, do I see myself there? Is it going to be a good fit? So that was a great point and a great just sort of lesson on company culture. And thinking, Andrew, we've got some econ majors on here, and we have some non-econ majors on here. What do you think are some things students can be doing right now to gain entry into the field of economic litigation consulting?
Yeah. I think one of the benefits of consulting is that I've seen that folks, we talked about this earlier with liberal arts degrees. If you're a liberal arts degree in general, which can be a ton of different majors, you can do well in consulting. I think you already have a lot of great communication skills and presentation skills that you can bring. I would say for folks that might not be as well versed in, quantitative work, that's always something that you can improve upon. And that will help you break into the consulting field, at least as you start recruiting, and you start trying to, be cognizant of the fact that, you're going to have your resume. Your resume is your first impression with the firm. Oftentimes, having some of those quantitative skills are really good. So whether that be, some, Coursera class that you took on some sort of database management, or even, some sort of project that you can showcase where you use some complex Excel formulas and being able to manage data. I think that that's really important. I mean, for my work specifically, we work heavily in data analytics. So I would say certainly, definitely beef up the quantitative skills and experience if you can. For some other, consulting groups, might be more emphasis on policy and research, maybe that you would want to try and do. But I think just trying to, get that resume as beefed up possible with quantitative and soft skills too. I mean, if that's what you want to speak to, I think that's just as important. One thing I want to just plug in there, as you are kind of preparing for recruiting, I like to tell this to a lot of students, and I've done some mock interviews down with the comm school over the last few years. And one thing that I always like to say is always have a really good story that can flow all the way from maybe it's high school to now, or a story that could be starting in your second year to now, but have that kind of like a good story of, I started here, that led to my interest in, data analytics. And then I took this class that was really interesting third year, which really pushed me towards, finance. And so that's really why I want to do the financial consulting that, I'm currently applying to. Yeah. Having some story that really shows that you've thought about this and that you've invested, a good amount of time thinking about this. And maybe it's been kind of a 2-year road and you've been wanting to do consulting for a long time. People love to see that, because at the end of the day, we want consultants who are going to stay and who are going to do good work, and they're going to stay invested and, really add to not only the professional value of the company, but also the cultural value too.
I love that response. That was incredible. And I think too, Andrew mentioned Coursera, which is an online learning platform students, and we have access to several Coursera courses. It's on the website, but until July 30th, we have a more extensive library because of COVID. So if you have questions about Coursera and some classes to take, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, or Jen Jones is on this call as well from the Eco Career Office. Thank you to her for helping sponsor this event. So keep that in mind. It's a great tool that Andrew just mentioned, but great for learning some of those maybe harder quantitative skills that maybe you don't have as much exposure to a liberal arts degree. So that was a great point.
Yeah.
Awesome. So sort of on the same vein, I think many students this summer, obviously, were not able to secure internships because of the COVID lifestyle. So in thinking about maybe some skills or some areas that students can maybe gain some experience in this summer, you talked about sort of bulking out the resume, which can be harder, I guess, when there's not really internships that are out there as much. Any advice or insight on projects or things they could do to help bolster their resume in that skill section?
Yeah. I would try and get involved again, like back to what we had talked about earlier with, trying to show in your resume that you have quantitative experience. And so it doesn't necessarily, I think that in the fall, first off, companies will be very cognizant of that fact that, internships got canceled. If you show that you tried to take initiative and do some sort of experience in the summer to build yourself professionally, I think they'll really appreciate that. And, definitely you'd want to highlight that in your interviews. But that's where I'd say, probably try and reach out to professors and do some sort of research of some sort. Or maybe, try and jump into a case competition. I don't know if there's any sort of case competitions to get started, this early on in the summer related to UVA, but, anything like that to help give you experience in team-based projects, I think will be really important, because a big part of the behavioral interviews that you'll get at any consulting firm or industry company is going to be, how do you work on a team? What's the time that you've had a challenge? So being able to have good answers to that through some experiences. They don't even necessarily have to be, again, like internships. They can just be, case competitions. They can be research that you had with three other peers when you were working with a professor. I think that's a good way to beef up that resume. I think that taking classes, I know that there's online college classes that Harvard, Berkeley, Yale are offering with really esteemed professors. I'm personally taking a class right now through Yale on the science of well-being. Totally like just like a personal, interesting project or a course that I'm taking. But in that same vein, they have a lot of classes though related to analytics and related to consulting, and so in a lot of that stuff's all on Coursera. And I think, like Drew said, it should be free for you guys. Definitely take advantage of that. And I'll tell you that once you get out of school, you'll wish that you had Coursera for free and a lot of things like that, because you guys have so many great resources. So taking advantage of those this summer, especially if you don't have an internship, is great. And I think you can put a lot of that stuff on your resume and then just speak to the fact that, you didn't have an internship because it got rescinded due to COVID, and therefore you spent that time investing in yourself. And I think that that's a perfectly good answer and shows that you're invested in improving yourself for consulting.
And we'll also add LinkedIn Learning to students is something else you can be doing as well, for similar to Coursera, but online, and that can go on your LinkedIn profile too. And Jen's throwing some really helpful things in the chat, so students definitely take a look at that. Some great resources in there for you too. So looking back, Andrew, sort of you knew then what you know now about this industry, about consulting. What's one piece of advice you would have given yourself as you were entering recruiting back when you were a student at UVA?
I think that I was fortunate where, and I don't even think I didn't do this, but I got lucky. I fell into a job that I really enjoyed. But consulting is a huge industry. I mean, you can do, it's funny when people say I want to do consulting, because it's just so much, it's such a big and vague, broad area of professionalism. So, I mean, you could do management consulting, there's risk consulting, there's, policy research consulting. It spans, the gamut of all industries too. And so finding that specific type of consulting that you want to do, as well as the industry that you want to do it in, is something that I would recommend doing in these next few months. I don't know if these are mostly third years going on fourth year that are attending this, or if it's second year is going to be third years, but regardless, in the fall, you're going to get thrown at so many companies, requesting you to join these various Zoom calls and trying to get you educated on their firms. And so being able to do that research right now to figure out which companies you'd like to start reaching out to, whether it be, reaching out to, the UVA alums that work there, or just doing your own due diligence on their websites. I think that's a great way to figure out, I want to do management consulting, or I want to do forensic and litigation consulting, whatever that might be. Because I remember when I was applying, I didn't really know that difference, and I kind of just applied because I saw that the culture was pretty great at FTI, and I knew some people that worked there, and I liked data analytics. Like, that was kind of it for me. That's really why I went. And then I really enjoyed the work that I was doing once I started, but I didn't really have a great understanding of what I would be doing. And so I would challenge a lot of students to go in, figure out, what consulting you want to do, and do that by talking to alums, figure out, on a day-to-day basis, it might sound cool to do forensic litigation consulting in the healthcare space but maybe you don't like to do analytics. Maybe you're more of a researcher, in which case I would say this probably isn't as good of a fit of a company for you, or of a segment for you, because we don't do as much research. We do more data analysis. And so doing that research will allow you to kind of differentiate the differences between the day-to-day jobs of folks that are in Deloitte strategy versus the folks that are in the Accenture analytics group. So that's the kind of stuff that I think I would try and do now, and then that will allow you to have a much more targeted vision when you start applying in the fall.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And Andrew, you alluded to Zoom calls with companies, and I think that probably feels intimidating to some students in thinking about how do I make an impression. Any advice or insight on the virtual interview or recruitment process to share with students as they're thinking about, hey, I want to make a really good impression, I'm just not exactly sure how to do that?
Yeah, so we learn and this is something else, just what I was thinking about it, something else that happens in consulting is there's a lot of professional learning that happens. And so one thing that we were actually educated on last year was how much your visual mannerisms and things like that come out, and how important that is when you're doing Zoom calls versus when you are maybe on the phone. When you're on the phone, visual is zero, and now everything is coming from your tone and your and how you're speaking, conveying. And now with Zoom, now it has nothing to do with your personal presence, your physical presence. It has everything to do with your visual. Now everyone's looking at you, and so just keeping that in mind when you do have these calls is important. So I think I'd recommend is having obviously wear business casual whenever you're talking to somebody. I wouldn't be wearing a t-shirt. I think that when you are having these conversations, you need to treat it as if you were meeting them in person, kind of. I wouldn't say wear a suit and tie, but maybe during an interview you might want to wear a suit and tie. But if you're just having like an informational call or something like that, definitely be in business casual. Confidence is really important too. I would kind of go in acting like or trying your best to show that you've done this before. This is you've kind of got the range right now because you're asking a lot of the questions. You're the one who's interested. They have the answers, and so you want to bring that aura of confidence. And I think that really comes through in Zoom calls. If you have that confidence, if you're really kind of skittish and you kind of act like you don't really want to be in the call, or you seem really flustered, maybe there's other things going on in the background, that will very quickly be apparent to the person who's talking with you. So you just want to be very, very cognizant of those cues. But I think the great thing about Zoom calls, and I was talking to Drew about this before you all got on, is that there are so many benefits, I think, to us going virtual in recruiting. And it's right now you think that, oh man, I'm not going to be able to go to these coffee chats that are going on, or all these mellow mushroom happy hours that are going to be hosted by Capital One, whatever it might be. But now you're going to be able to go in and kind of manage your own time a little bit better, because you'll have, you might have 7 different companies that are coming to UVA virtual grounds in 1 week. And you could probably go to them all because they're just going to be, 30-minute sessions, and you'll be able to educate yourself on all of these different companies. You're not going to have to devote 2 hours to going all the way to Mellow Mushroom, or 2 hours to going to the Biltmore to have some sort of, discussion with these folks. And frankly, it's a little less intimidating. Now you don't have to go and talk to those people. Now you're just kind of warming yourself up to it in a Zoom call. And then, I would hope that I would challenge you to maybe reach out to them and try and have a one-on-one information session afterwards. But, initially you're kind of just going to be listening and educating yourself. And so I think this should hopefully allow you guys to learn more about more companies, which will in turn allow you to apply to more companies. And that's a benefit that I didn't have when I was applying to different firms. I think I only applied to maybe ultimately like 5-ish firms, I think, in total. But if I had this ability where everyone, it was the new norm to have virtual chats for all of the recruiting sessions, I probably would have applied to closer to 10 or 12 companies, just because it's so easy to join all these Zoom calls.
I love that. I think that's great perspective, and students hopefully maybe a little bit of a perspective shift if you're feeling sort of anxiety about it. And students, if you have questions, I'm wrapping up the questions that I have for Andrew, so please feel free to pop them in the chat. He's super willing to answer and happy to help. So please feel free to do that as we're continuing on. I guess at this point, Andrew, sort of what advice generally do you have for students that are interested in consulting? It sounds like we've talked a little bit about networking. We can kind of go that direction, but just in general, what advice do you have?
I would go back to just like the how you should spend your summer.
Okay.
One thing I would not be shy about is just emailing an alum that is in a company that you might know nothing about, but think you might have an idea about. For instance, again, I'm picking on like Capital One. Like if you know very little about Capital One and what they do other than that they're a bank, reach out to go on, use LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great tool. So use LinkedIn, limit to UVA alums, limit to Capital One, look and see which, I wouldn't go and just ask a random Capital One employee who works in California and works in sales there. I would, try and find someone who works in the group that you're interested in, but then just shoot them an email. You don't have to write something super long. Just write, a few sentences saying that, you're a rising fourth year and that, you came across that person's profile on LinkedIn. We're really interested in that group and that you'd love to just chat and learn a little bit more. People will be very, very willing to talk to you. And I've had a ton of these informational conversations, and I appreciate it because I know I was in that situation when I was a fourth year. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And people are very willing to do that. And I wouldn't be deterred if someone doesn't respond to you. Just people are very busy. This is a weird time. I would, keep on emailing people and just educating yourself. And that obviously is going to have unintended positive benefits to, them now knowing who you are. So for instance, if you apply now in the fall, they'll remember your name as somebody who was a go-getter and reached out in June or July with interest about the company. So I think that's something that I didn't do enough of that I think that people should do. Again, to going back to really educating yourself on, what type of consulting you want to do. So that's a really good thing to prepare yourself for the consulting recruiting. I would also say focus on a lot of time on your resume too. And this is going back to your story. Like have a story in your resume showing exactly kind of what led you to where you are now. The investment banking resume will be different than the consulting resume, I'll say. I mean, in the investment banking resume will be different than than you applying to a sales position. Sales position will be different than consulting. So they're all like, you want to restructure your resume to best fit the needs of the company that you're applying to. And so, some of them are just subtle changes. Like you might want to make things a little bit more quantitative, showing, I was able to increase the ROI by $50,000 for this company. People love those quantitative points, especially in consulting in your resume. So really working with where the economics career office or working with any other career center at UVA, I think is really good to just strengthen that resume, because that's the first thing that they're going to see. And that's especially the first thing that they're going to see now that we're all virtual right now, because really you're going to have, maybe some conversations on Zoom, but then at the end of the day, they're going to get your application. That's the first impression they'll have. So having that resume and having a really clean and concise cover letter is going to go a long way. And getting those started now, there's nothing there. I mean, if for anybody who's especially doesn't have an internship anymore, definitely start working on that now. And I'd lastly just say, for interviews too, just working on, getting those stories prepared, the STAR method, situation, task, analysis, result, have those really fine tuned. I continue to update those as I continue to work, just figuring out better and better stories that I can tell of me being in team-based situations whenever I do, go on to my next career. So that's always a good, and I'll tell you, the advantage in consulting is that you're going to have so many of those stories. So that's a nice plus when you do move on to your, if you ever move out of consulting, you've got so many experiences working with teams, having experiences where you've had an unruly coworker who didn't agree with you and you had to go about and find some solution. All that stuff. I've got plenty of those, and you all will undoubtedly have those as well. Fortunately, when you get into the consulting career.
Andrew, I feel like I couldn't have written that script better myself with what you just said. I felt like you were just channeling the Career Center when you were saying what you said, which is wonderful. So students, he mentioned LinkedIn and the alumni feature tool. If you have any questions about how to navigate that, or if you have questions about your resume, reach out to Jen, reach out to myself. We're happy to help. There are also some online tools you can use that we're here for. This is a great time to be working on those things when there's less noise for you over the summer for classes and things like that. So please feel free to reach out. Happy to do that. That's a great piece of advice. And thank you so much. We do have a question in the chat, which I'll read. So for economic litigation, how deep does your knowledge of law need to be starting out? How did you develop a deeper understanding of the legal field, terms, methodologies you needed to understand to do at your job?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I would say you don't need to have a prerequisite, experience in law or anything to start in forensic litigation consulting. You might not touch law in your first few projects, any sort of, legal, working with the legal team at all. You might, right off the bat start working on an expert report. So it all depends. I'll err on the side of, say you do jump onto an expert report your first, few months, you'll be educated in a very quick learning curve. What the consultants need to know about law. It's not much. I mean, it's going to be, just knowing what a qui tam matter is, for instance, which is just like a whistleblower case, understanding plaintiff and defendant. And what I think is really important, though, is understanding the relationship between the attorneys, FTI or the consultant, and the end client, and why we have, why there are certain deadlines and what needs to be met, and what some of the relationship, for instance, there's like meet and confer conversations, which is like a legal term for when the plaintiff's counsel communicates with the defendant's counsel and they have some sort of conversation to try and figure out how they can compromise. Little things like that. It's good to know about those as you're trying to better apply some recommendations for the client and for the legal team. But at the end of the day, anything you need to know, the partners at your consulting firm will already know, and they'll be able to educate you on beforehand. So you do not need to have any sort of legal expertise. Personally, my father is an attorney, and so that was another kind of reason why I was interested in some sort of legal litigation consulting. But I knew nothing about law, and now I know a little bit, but I still don't think I even know enough to be dangerous. And so I think you'll learn everything you need when you're on the job. And that's what I can say for data analytics as well. You don't need to have a significant, background in SQL and SAS and Tableau. You will be educated on the job, a lot of that stuff. And then through a lot of the foundational training that we do on a yearly basis. In the summer, we typically send people to like New York, and they get some education on a lot of this stuff.
Cool. That's awesome. Sort of following up to that, Andrew, for Jaden's question, what do people tend to do when they leave forensic consulting?
Well, that's a good question, especially for me, because I'm actually going to be pursuing my MBA in the fall. So I'm going to be heading down to Duke to get a master's of business administration. So that is one kind of next step that people can take after consulting. A lot of folks will stay in consulting, and people will, it's very typical, especially in economic and litigation consulting. People will start as a consultant and they'll rise up all the way through to senior managing director. You don't need to get any sort of master's degree to do that. That's something that we like to boast as a reason to stay with the company. You can, as long as you're continuing to do good work and add value to the firm, you will keep rising up. And I can think of at least 3 partners right now that did that very thing. And so typically, people will stay in consulting. If they choose to pivot, they might pursue an MBA, which is what I'm doing. And I'll either go back into consulting. If I were to go back into consulting, I'd probably come back to my job because I really enjoy FTI and the work that I do. If I wanted to pivot, I might go into strategy consulting, where I might do more so some of the work that's done at Bain and BCG and some other firms, while maybe staying in the healthcare sector. Another option that people take is going in industry. So that's very typical. So you've now got the skills as a consultant for the last 2 or 3 years. You might have worked with an Aetna or Humana for 3 years, and you feel like you have really good expertise that other people don't have as a consultant because you've worked with a ton of different firms, and you might bring that in industry. So now you might say, okay, well, I'm going to go work for United Health Group now because I've got so much experience understanding the Medicare Advantage market. And so you will be a value add at any insurer after a few years working in Medicare Advantage. I can guarantee you that. So that's another area. And I think the last area is, and this is something I don't see as much of, but folks going to law school. So to Jaden's point earlier, some people do really fall in love with the litigation aspect of litigation consulting, and they like the idea that they could, not only understand things from the consultant's perspective, but really bring that to the legal side too. And so a lot of folks will go to law school for 2 or 3 years, or for 3 years, and then they'll come out as associates at some of these big law firms in DC and New York.
Awesome. That was very comprehensive. Thank you. I think that addresses a little bit of Angela's question, but Madeline's question,
and that's what I was reading Angela's question sort of when I started talking about it. So.
That was awesome. That was perfect. Rewinding a little bit to Madeline's question, I've heard that many consultants travel every week. Does your role involve a lot of travel as well?
So that is a tough question. You're going to get a different response from every consultant you ask. With us, we do data support. So we're helping attorneys with structured data, documents that can all be provided remotely. So we have these secure file sharing sites that we can receive all of the data that we need, and we can do everything on site at our office. So we don't actually have to go to the client's site. It depends though. I mean, some clients just prefer that the consultants be there. For me personally, I've had client interviews that I've done for some clients down in California. And I was going back and forth to California probably 4 or 5 times in the winter for the last 3 years. I've had some experience going out to Phoenix, going to New York, going to Chicago, but it's very few and far between. I don't think it's something that I would not say it's an experience that many people have had in our Health Solutions Forensic Litigation group. Now I'll say there are other groups at FTI that are on the road. They're kind of the road warriors. They're Monday through Thursday working all the time. I know that, if you got, everyone's got friends at, Deloitte or at Accenture or EY, a lot of those folks have experiences working Monday through Thursday. That is a question that I would ask any consulting firm right off the bat when you were getting educated on their culture. What can you expect? And hopefully they'll be very transparent with that. With us, I'm always very transparent that it's probably like 10 or 20% that you would be working, if that, just in the event that you do have a project where you might be, shipped off to Philadelphia for 4 months. And I'm thinking of examples because I do have coworkers that have done that. But it's kind of cool too. I mean, one of my colleagues was in Switzerland for 3 weeks working on a project. We've had folks go to Dubai. I was fortunate enough when I was in California, I was in San Diego, sunny San Diego for like all of December, which is awesome because it was, 20 degrees here in DC and extremely nice and 75 degrees and sunny in San Diego. So it's nice, and it's nice in moderation. So I would recommend, if you really want to be that road warrior, there's certainly a consulting firm for you there. But if you want to be working usually in your office, there's also consulting firms that have that work balance.
Which leads to Ruth's question a little bit about what's the work-life balance like working in economic litigation? Is it similar or different to what it looks like in management consulting?
Being completely honest, it's going to have ebbs and flows. So you're going to have experiences where you will be working 50, 60, 70 hours in some weeks. I'm just being totally honest, it happens. And it's litigation consulting. So you might have, a deadline where attorneys come back and attorneys are not data analysts. They are not even trying to be. So they're going to assume that a lot of this work can be done really quickly. And sometimes it takes a lot of time to get a lot of that work not only done, but also quality controlled and things like that. So sometimes it does just naturally take, more manpower, more resources to get certain things done in a week. And you might be working, in a week, it could be, 70 hours. But I think the advantage in economic consulting is that we're a smaller group. And so we are very cognizant of people working long hours. And so if I, for instance, know that a consultant is working, he's worked 50 hours for the last 50 or 60 hours for the last month, I'm going to do my best to try and staff him on a project afterwards which is going to be a little bit more cushion. It'll be, 35, 40 hours where he's just kind of doing the standard, 9 to 6 work life. So we definitely make sure that we have the work-life balance. There are always going to be experiences where you're going to fall in the extreme where you'll be working 70 or 80 hours for like a week or two. It happens. It will happen in economic litigation consulting. It'll happen in management consulting. But we do our best to make sure that doesn't happen because we're very cognizant of burnout and making sure that people are getting, the personal, being able to live their personal lives as well. And in management consulting, I think it's similar. I mean, I've got friends who, maybe they do work 40 hours a week, but that 40 hours is actually a little bit more taxing on them because they're actually traveling Monday through Thursday. So that's actually really tough. So, if you're billing 40 hours a week while also traveling to Seattle from DC on Sunday and then Thursday night, that can be really taxing. And so, I think consulting in general is just kind of known as an industry where you're going to have to put in a little bit more work than 40 hours at times, but it's not going to be at the level of investment banking, for instance. And, I can be a personal story there. I've been working at FTI for 7 years, and I have had times where I've been very frustrated that I've been working, 60, 70 hours to get this deadline done, but then it's done. And then I now know that my manager is going to put me on a project that'll probably be something closer to 35 or 40 because he knows that I need to have a good work-life balance, and I've been doing a lot of work for him, and that I need to be they need to find resources to allow me to have a better work lifestyle. So I know that I kind of threw a lot at you, and I was thinking at the same time like all these different experiences that some other folks have had, but I think overall in economic litigation consulting they do a good job with work-life balance, and that's actually I'd say it was less the case in 2013, but it's much more the case in 2020. In general, the cultures have become very much gung-ho on work-life balance. We have wellness trainings that go on. We have meditation on our rooftop. We have these we've got a completely new office cafe where everyone comes in and there's a lot of camaraderie that goes on. We've got like a kombucha keg of kombucha that you can drink out of every day. And so they're trying to find ways to make your life a little bit more enjoyable while you're at work. And then obviously they're also trying to minimize the number of hours that you're working to make sure that, everyone is not burning out. And I think they've done a really good job with that, not only in my company, but other companies as well.
I think I got to change jobs. Don't listen, Catherine. That sounds great. Well, for sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and end it. Thank you, Andrew, so much. And again, special thank you to Jen Jones and the Economic Career Office for helping secure Andrew as a volunteer and being here and helping us with this organized. This was great. Students, I hope you learned a lot from Andrew. He was wonderful. Again, thank you so much for the time and the thoughtful responses. This was really, really helpful.
Yeah, and here, why don't do you want me to communicate just my email address? If anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I don't know what you want to do with that, Drew, but.
Sure, if you're comfortable, I can send out the follow-up message I send to students. I can just put it in there if you're comfortable, and they can follow directly with you from that.
Sure, that sounds good.
That sounds great. So students, you'll get an email from me, and I'll include his email address there so you can check back in if you have additional questions. Thank you for that, Andrew.
All right, thanks.
Have a night, y'all. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. All right, bye.
Bye.